granniopteryx, granniopteryx. She knows the truth, she's linking every link.
Hello, so it's the 10th of November and yesterday Tim Davie, who was the Director General of the BBC, and Deborah Turness, who was the Chief Executive Officer of BBC News, both have resigned after a series of news reporting scandals which really have made their positions untenable. However, you know that Brighton rock thing with the word Brighton going all the way through? For those of you who don't know anything about Brighton rock, I'll put a picture up here. Well, you can break the top and the bottom off the Brighton rock. You'll still have Brighton going all the way through it. I'll explain why I'm talking about Brighton rock after I've told you. I'm Granniopteryx. Please like this video. Please share it. Please subscribe to my channel. Oh yeah, please subscribe to my channel and click the notification bell because, I am recording. Click the notification bell because that helps the algorithm or something. Anyway, I'll talk about Tim Davie, Deborah Turness and the mess that the BBC has become after Granniopteryx has done her roar. All right, so the first intimation of real trouble at the BBC was the Hamas Kids show, which apart from these, that was a documentary called How to Survive in a War Zone or something, and it featured a young lad who was trying to live a reasonable life with bombs dropping all around him. It was something like that. Apart from, as it turns out, the suspicious background of the central character himself, the whole show contained a number of really obvious continuity errors which just showed contempt for the viewer. For instance, one of the other kids featured, who was supposedly doing all these jobs looking after sick people during one day. Well, his hair length changed quite dramatically in several of the shots, and so did his shoes. You know, it was quite obvious that he'd been filmed over a period of weeks. And nobody in the BBC, from top to bottom, seemed to notice that. So that was one thing. I have my own personal little dossier of several instances, and I made videos about them, and I can't go through those now. The straw that broke the camel's back was that absolutely egregious editing distortion of Donald Trump's January the 6th. January the 6th speech. Wow, that was a mouthful. It could quite possibly land the BBC in a defamation lawsuit. I wouldn't blame Trump if he did take the BBC for all he could get from it. It could cost the BBC, that is, the licence payers, millions. I'm not a licence payer, so I can be a little bit casual about that. As for Tim Davie and Deborah Turness, I suppose those are two media people not in line for a knighthood next year. Both of them have presided over the most corrupt, immoral and mendacious period of BBC history. In an organisation that, well, you'll have to believe me, I used to work there, it lost its honesty, virginity quite a long time before either of them took office. And that's why their resignation, or should I say their ritual sacrifice, won't make the slightest bit of difference to the way the BBC operates, not if it's allowed to stay the way it is. Just for a quick potted history, by the 1990s, when I was working there, it was quite obvious that if you wanted to get anywhere in the BBC, you had to walk around with a copy of the Guardian newspaper. Or take your stories from The Guardian and certainly voice opinions which were the opinions of The Guardian. Oh, by the way, the BBC advertised its jobs available in The Guardian. Surprise, surprise. And nowhere else apart from the in-house magazine Ariel. Look, it wasn't actually planned. The BBC used to have quite a lot of conservative types as well, so much so that a rumour got round that the green triangle which was stamped on some employees' dossiers was actually a Christmas tree, in reference to the song sung by socialists in this country. It's called The Red Flag and is sung to the tune of the German Christmas carol O Tannenbaum. O Tannenbaum, O Tannenbaum, wie grün sind deine Blätter. Yeah, well, whatever. The story goes that in collaboration with MI5, if someone was suspected of having communist leanings, there'd be a green triangle, pointy end up, stamped on their dossiers so that others would know this chap or chapess has to be viewed with some suspicion. Whether this actually referenced the Christmas tree or it was just an arrow meaning refer this up is a matter for some disagreement, but without doubt the BBC had a lot of suspicion for left-leaning people until in the mid-80s 2 journalists who happened to work for The Observer made the story public under the title How MI5 Vets BBC Staff. And there was a bit of a fuss about that. And the whole thing was dropped. And what happened after that was that as leftward-leaning people started coming in on the lower levels, of course, they eventually worked their way up through the organisation, some ending up on the appointments boards. And then they started choosing job candidates with whom they agreed politically. And then this next generation went on to work their way up, ending up on appointments boards and started choosing employees even more committed to the left than before. And it didn't take long before the whole BBC was captured by an ever upward spiralling socialist ethos. It was just like that Russian geneticist Dmitry Belyayev and his generationally more and more compliant foxes. You know, he conducted this genetics experiment on them. Well, of course, when you're choosing employees for their political opinions instead of their competence, it probably started with people choosing lefties for their competence, and then the lefties started choosing other lefties a little less for their competence than their leftward leanings, and then the next lot more for their leftwardness than their competence, and so it snowballed. And when you start doing that, you end up with a lot of incompetent employees, and that's what's been happening to the BBC. The sort of sloppy ideological rubbish that they've been turning out in the past 5 years at least, is the culmination of that self-selection that started in the late 80s. And they self-selected for leftwardism. And that's why the disappearance of Tim Davie and Deborah Turness won't make the slightest difference. They'd have to clear out nearly all the top management and the secondary management and possibly most of the producers to make any difference at all. In 1999, Kofi Annan, then Secretary General of the UN, delivered a speech to the United Nations in which he referred to the BBC as the rock of broadcasting. Well, he had that partially right. Some of you do know about Brighton Rock or Blackpool Rock. It's a sort of baton of sugar which has the name of the holiday resort cleverly inserted right down the middle of the stick. And that's what the BBC is like. Getting rid of Davy or Turness might shorten the stick of rock, but the words lefty, pretentious, superior, condescending and arrogant go through the whole organisation as completely as Brighton goes through that stick of rock. All right, how to deal with it? I don't know. I'd suggest they just melt it down and start again. OK, till next time. You can help my channel by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. That's quite important. And by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels and to donation methods are in the description. But the best way you can help is simply by clicking like and notify. Thank you.